But today we're going to discuss a topic of work-life balance. And I can't think of two better people to discuss that with.
Put our family first. Now that sounds wonderful over the airwaves, right? Oh, they put their family first. It was a lot easier said than done, but it was a choice that we made.
So it's always been that way for us. Mm-hmm. And as we grew, that was part of our mindset. Our mindset was, how do we make it work as a family?
So what I thought was hard was probably a lot harder than I even thought. Right.
I mean, work when you're starting out a business, never easy. It's like so.
And it eventually ushered into heaven. And we think about when we get there, how many will be waiting? I mean, that is an overwhelming feeling, and it keep wanting to keep on and keep on.
I was always into that. Those ideas were always fun, and we would just talk and dream about them. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes that's where things were birthed.
Yeah.
From the standpoint of those creative ideas.
And so that was very difficult. And I can't tell you that that's altogether as long ago as you would think.
Sure did. Exactly right.
To go get some ice
cream. Yes. And it's so exciting to be a part of.
It's going to be amazing.
It really is. It's one of the biggest things I think we've learned.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Around the Table with Vickie. I'm your co-host, Chris Runk, and across the table from me, as always, is your host and my mother, Vickie Runk.
Hello, everybody. It is April the 15th.
At filming,
and I know it's going to get to you guys later, but we have to say that today is your daddy's 60th birthday, and he's here with us on the show today.
You promised me this wasn't going to be a 60th birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Big one.
I'm not going to sing because I don't want listeners to leave early.
No, but we just came from a wonderful birthday party that your staff gave for you, which was fabulous. And everything was very intentional in that party to make you feel special. So I think we've had a good day. And so we wanted to close out the evening, Christopher, with a little one-on-one. We've found from hearing from the general public that a lot of people like to find out some things about Runk Pratt throughout our time on the air and on podcasts. So you've put together a few questions for your dad and I think you're going to be more involved than you think you will be because you remember some of this better than we do.
Well, wonderful. Well, like Mom said, Dad, welcome back. Welcome to Studio 2.0.
That's right. That's the first time here. This is great.
This is
wonderful.
Your first time?
Hopefully I look better now that I'm older.
This is your first time around the table. So welcome back, Brian Runk of Runk Pratt Communities. And thank you for being here.
Just keep stepping up the game, huh?
That's right.
So, like Mom said, we really have listened to listeners and what they've enjoyed to hear. So today, it seems like Dad always comes back on the family entrepreneurship shows as well.
That's what he's the best at.
I was always told
here.
you just call me and when ratings decrease, you have to bring me in. That's what I was told. So I thought it was one of those kind of days.
Since you're turning 60 today, we're going to let you believe that.
Yeah.
But today, we're going to discuss the topic of work-life balance. And I can't think of two better people to discuss that with. So we're going to dive in some maybe some family history, how you balanced. I know from your eldest child's perspective, I can say that I didn't realize maybe how difficult work-life balance it truly is until maybe I was probably 28. And you sit back and you think of how did Mom and Dad juggle, and I have no children, but how did you juggle a growing business, a thriving business, much with 3 children, all the sporting events, keeping us fed, going, I can honestly say on air, you never missed a sporting game for any of your 3 children, which looking back at my age now is extremely impressive. And I want to say thank you for making time for each of us.
Even clarifying, that's not just home games. That was away games.
Away games, yep.
I was the bus driver, some of them.
Yeah.
Well, you went to, Chandler, mostly,
not for Christopher.
Yeah, for Chandler. Well, first of all, your dad and I, in the earliest of days, when God gave us you before your brother and sister were even thought of, we had made a commitment to ourselves and to the Lord that we would put our family first. Now, that sounds wonderful over the airwaves, right? Oh, they put their family first. It was a lot easier said than done. And so when we tell these stories or we talk about it, it was never easy. but it was a choice that we made. And as your mother, I would not have missed anything you guys were doing. Now, that did mean that I carried a cell phone and a computer most of the time. And while you were warming up or, in between a break or maybe having to head to the car a few minutes to answer a call, that it meant that we were just intentional with being there. And it was a very fast-paced life. Looking back, just the fact that you're 60 today, and we kind of sit back.
She keeps bringing that up, doesn't she?
That's the third time you said it today. The third time. I'm going to predict 18 times today.
I'll be good. I won't say it anymore. It's only because I have one more year till so I got to rub that in.
You better wait. When you get there, we're going to have a podcast again, and I'm going to bring it up 20 times.
Okay, you can. But so having said all of that, it is not easy. But when you make your family the priority, we've found in our lives that God's always going to bless you. So what I thought was hard was probably a lot harder than I even thought, because you're right, it was second nature. And then there's 10 years between you and your brother. So I can remember being at sporting events for you and bringing you a Gatorade in a bottle and having him on my hip with a baby bottle in the other hand and thinking, how in the world am I going to make all this work? But along the way, each time God would send us, better employees, and we would advance the amount of employees we had on staff. It seemed like every juncture that we needed to rise up, He helped us do that. And that's why, looking back now, it's a lot of fun to see really just God kind of show up and show off. Like, you didn't think I could make this work for you, but I really didn't need your permission. I'm going to do it anyway. Wouldn't you say the same thing?
Yeah, but I still think you're early on in that. I think if you think how everything started, back in the day when we were first married, you were working in a nursing home.
Mm-hmm.
He was on the way, and you wanted to still work. That's when, you found Spout Spring, went to Spout, but your dad and I weren't part of it. Basically, It was you and your mom.
Right.
So talking about a family business, it was you and your mom.
Right.
And you were a mom. You were going to be a mom. And I remember when he was born, we had that red Chevy Blazer, and you're taking him down the road.
Yeah.
And your mom's with you, and your mom was going to Food Line buying food, and he was with you all the time.
So he was just incorporated into the work
part
life.
of what we did.
No, I don't think any of the three of you could remember life without, being entrepreneurs and chasing, the business life. And so, but we did make everything very intentional for it to be about family as well.
And we were able to control that.
Yes.
It was us, and it was you and your mom at the start. And so you guys, you almost had like this built-in babysitter, and she was there, and she did all the work stuff, and you all didn't know any different. That's just what you did to make it happen. And I think that's just
true. When Nana and Papa were incorporated into everything, it was really nice because we always had two extra hands, and we knew without a doubt if he and I had to go to something, none of the three of you ever had a nanny. You never had babysitters. You were never left with anyone other than your dad and I and your Nana and Papa and your Aunt Karen at times. And that really was important to me because I could have had all the accolades in the world, but if I wasn't known as being a good wife and a good mother, then I didn't want anything else. So I wanted the business world, but I also wanted to be all the things a mom could be. That's what made me get into business to begin with, is that I needed an income, but I wanted to be a mom too. And I didn't want to give up. I didn't want to settle. And it's fun now to see young girls come across my path and them have kind of the same passion. And I just kind of tap them on the shoulder and say, you can do it if you make it intentional. And so, I think it's just early on knowing that if this was going to be a lifestyle for us, that once we started, there's no looking back. And so let's make it work on all ends.
It's always easier when you control the cards. Like if we were working for somebody else, you can't bring your child to work. You can't, go in late or whatever. We had the ability to do that. And you're right. That's what we did to make it work for the family. So it's always been that way for us. And as we grew, that was part of our mindset. The mindset was, how do we make it work as a family? And as the family grew and he got older, I
remember sending you on the floor a lot of times to be with the activities directors. And I was still always very worried, Make sure you keep up with him and, make sure he's sitting still and being respectful of the environment that you were in. And so, even though I let you go out and interact with the residents and feel what kind of world you were in, I think you realized early on, this is not a normal lifestyle.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I for one statement that always stands out, growing up, you've made it your entire life, is that I'm a mother first. Mm-hmm. And that always came first. You would always take care of the family, but at the same time, like you said, you would have that cell phone right there. So you took care of the family, but there was also a little bit of sacrifice,
yes.
But growing up, yes, activities directors were my babysitters. I grew up. I love activities with our seniors. I still love to be a part of them when I can. I can call a mean game of bingo,
yes.
Playing beach volleyball. But I know you also kept those activities directors on a tight leash because I was with them. So I don't know if I would have wanted to be those activities directors.
No, they would always make sure they hand delivered. And no, as you got older, you'd say, "I'll just go back to my mom's office." They're like, "No, I'm going to go back with you and make sure you get to her."
Even the kitchen staff kept me well fed.
That's right.
I remember getting plenty of ice cream. So it was fun to grow up in the homes. Mm-hmm. But hey, I want to jump off with a fun icebreaker question, and that is, what is one family moment that happened in the middle of the work week that made you laugh and stop and think, this could only happen in a family business?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, what I remember most it was early on when we had just opened Leesville Road, and your parents were actually involved back in the day then, and we got a new dog. And again, just like, Christopher's at work, well, we take the puppy to work. Mm-hmm. The dog is in the office, and somebody opened the door, and it's like a new puppy. Bam, the dog's out the door. And, we were on a main road there. So there's a parking lot, then there's a road with, tons of cars on it. So I remember,
our family business, our family offices were back there. So that's why the dog kind of got let out.
So the dog stayed with us, brand new puppy. Just like your kids, you bring your dog to work, you take care of it. The door gets cracked and the dog's outside. And I just remember Vickie's dad. I mean, he always tells these stories when he was younger about playing football and all these great stories that he did. Well, man, I saw the speed. I mean, he dashed out that door, and we were on this this little platform. He jumped the platform, sprinted across, and this is a brand new puppy. He was little. He sprinted across the parking lot. I remember he dove in the parking lot to save the dog. And he reached out, he grabbed the dog, he skinned his arm up, but he saved the dog.
He wasn't going to let that dog go armed.
So, I still can see that happening now. And, that's back in the days when he was able to fly around like that. But I remember that would have been a devastating loss for the family to lose a brand new puppy.
Well, and we're back in our offices where we all work together as a family. And
still to this day.
All
working in the back.
Nana and Papa were a part of everything as well. And so thank you, Papa, for saving Chelsea back in the day. But
that was our first Cocker Spaniel.
Yeah.
That was our first dog.
First and last. We weren't going to let
any
Cocker Spaniel.
Definitely not the last dog.
Not the last dog, but the last Cocker. So we wanted, it was fun because he was so proud of himself that he made sure that Chelsea was safe.
It was a big deal then, but we laugh about it now. What's happened because literally he skinned his arms up, skinned his leg, ripped his pants.
Yeah, but we were at work in a work day.
I really didn't know he could run that fast. I've heard stories of it, but I can vouch for the fact that he's a pretty quick guy.
Mm-hmm.
Running back speed.
That's right.
And so for me, Christopher, you and I were talking about this before we aired. You actually reminded me of this.
Mm-hmm. This is one of my favorite stories.
So Christopher was probably about 12 years old, and I was headed to Little Caesars like any other good mom on a Wednesday night, I think, and headed to get some pizza. And he was in the front seat, and he had about 4 or 5 pizzas stacked on his lap, and I get a call from our Leesville Road facility. I think that's where it all happens at. And I was told that there was a family that shouldn't be taking one of our residents out, had decided that she was going to take her out of the state, not just take her out. And so there was a discrepancy there of, is she safe? Because that particular family had told us that these people could not take mom out. And somehow or another, they had scooted into the community and taken that lady out the door. And Christopher will tell the story that he heard me say, I'm on 460, I'm going to turn around. And so I turned around and made it back to the facility to where I was able to watch that car that she was in pull out. And Christopher said it was one of the coolest things he ever witnessed. I stayed with that car all the way about halfway to Bedford. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, I'm on the phone with 911 and I'm letting them know I need help. I need you to help me get that resident out of that car, back in my car, and take them back to where they belong. And sure enough, the 911 worked with me. And when the squad car comes up, it's really cool, especially for a 12-year-old, and he's like, okay, I'm going to scoot in between you and the car. You can back off now. But I never let her leave my vision. Like, I had my eyes on her.
Well, you're forgetting one thing that was really important was the fact that the family knew that you had caught them sort of leaving with her. And you guys weren't just driving like a 55.
Right.
It was almost like a car chase.
Well, and when Mom gets the chance
she's
to go.
I will deny every bit of that.
She has a heavy foot.
So they pull in between me and the car. They're able to get the resident out. We take her back with us, Christopher, and put her back where she's supposed to be. And I remember driving home. It was just like any other day for me, because I'm kind of always, back in those days especially, caught up in the lives of our seniors. And I can remember Christopher walking through the door with our very cold pizzas by that time. And he said...
wait. While I was in the car, it was like Cops to me. I was watching an episode of the Cops. So don't you think I did have a few hot pieces of pizza while this was all happening.
You were eating.
Yeah, absolutely.
While we were doing this. But he looked at me and he said, Mom, that was so cool how you handled all of that. So it was very comical to me that, here I was trying to do dinner for our family, but in the meantime, I'm rescuing a resident.
Part of the car chase.
Yeah. So lots of fun stories, but those were two that stood out to us.
And for those just tuning in, I'm joined by my mother, Vickie Runk, and my dad, Brian Runk. So I know you guys get the question a lot when you tell people what you do or you introduce yourselves. And one of the first things they say is, I guess I'm assuming you're always working. Mm-hmm. What would you say how do you introduce yourselves when somebody says, well, I guess that means you're just always constantly working?
Well, I think you have to take that into what time frame we're talking about. So in the early days, I would have said, you're absolutely right. We are. And then as we get towards the middle part of our story, we've learned that we were starting to learn that life-work balance was extremely important to our health, to our spiritual life, to, our family life. And so we were going to have to make an effort to make it to where we could continue to work on just what we were good at and stay out of the weeds. And so that was very difficult. And I can't tell you that that's altogether as long ago as you would think. So I can date that back to anywhere between the years of 2016 to 2018. We began to hire on a higher hierarchy of employees to where we knew that, we were creeping into our 50s and now 60. That's another time.
There it is again.
It is. And we were going to have to make some changes on what we were going to be responsible for every day, all the while holding things very tightly. And I will have to say that has been a challenge. Would you not agree?
Oh, yeah, I think it is. But for me, I think in the early days, it was just different. Mm-hmm. I was energetic and knowing different. Mm-hmm. I would probably say, I work all the time.
Yeah.
But I felt like we loved what we did. Mm-hmm. And it really wasn't work. That was life.
Right.
Work, when you're starting out a business, it's never easy. It's life.
Well, let me expand that question then. Do either one of you truly believe in a work-life balance, or is it more of an integration?
I think it's more of an integration. I'm not sure. There is never a time that we can turn this off. We would be doing a disjustice not only to the people and our clients that we serve, but to over almost 600 employees now. We would be doing an injustice. We always knew that we were helping people feed their families and have careers. So we took that very seriously and still do to this day. And as we're mentoring now you and your sister and your brother, we're trying to explain to you that you always have to show up. But on the flip side of that, there has to be moments that are intentionally made for your body to rest and restore. And that is something that your dad and I had to learn the hard way. And when you're forced to do that, you then look back and say, some of my struggles could have been prevented had I done this sooner than later. But regardless, the way it is now is we are intentional about helping our bodies and minds and souls restore after we filled it up so much. We know when it's time to, okay, we're heading here now. We're going there. We'll be back in 4 or 5 days, and we refuel. The other thing that we've had to do along the way is to look for mentors that are older than us on the spiritual realm, and that have done really big things. Because of what we've done, it's not a small accomplishment. It's more of a broader accomplishment. So just to have someone mentor us that is just on a little smaller scale wouldn't really fill our cup. So we would need to find mentors that when we sit before them or we attend a conference or whatever, they understand just by looking in our eyes the load that is being carried, and then they pour into us. And that's something that, again, hit about 2018. We had to learn how important it was to find those people to help us get restored and stay that way. So I think we've learned, and definitely will preach that to your brother and sister and yourself, that you have to turn it off at a certain point, all the while carrying that cell phone. You still have to be able to pull away and restore your mind, body, and soul.
But I think with as you get older in business or just in life, you get wiser. I think in the early days, like from you learn from your examples. Like my dad was a workaholic, worked all the time, and you get that drive from what you're exposed to. But just because we're talking about we own our own business, and anybody who works, I don't care if you're a banker or a construction worker, people work hard, and you don't really know any different. I just think that, but back in that era, work never stopped at 5 o'clock. You just worked till the job was done. You take it home. When you go away, you just do it. So I don't know if that part was necessarily just because we are business owners. I think sometimes it's just your work ethics and your ethics as a person. Now, I think as time has gone on and we've grown and you get more responsibility, you get wiser. You can only do so many things. You have to learn to delegate. You have to learn to trust other people. But in the early days, when it's just us doing stuff, we juggled everything ourselves, and we made all that kind of stuff work. So I think that age has a piece with that. So
I think in business, it's for what you're saying, integration. It's segmented out in times of our lives.
Right.
Yeah.
Early days, you just you take a lot from what you're exposed to.
So, Mom, I think you kind of touched on it just a second ago. I think you were referencing some boundaries. Mm-hmm. What boundaries have you tried to set? Which ones have helped and worked, and which ones maybe didn't work at all? Mm-hmm.
Those are some good questions.
You get to start that one.
Well, first of all,
between work-life balance.
Yeah. So first of all, with boundaries with our family, I just know how much I'll put in one day now. Mm-hmm. And anything other than that just is not going to work with me. I also know what time I'm going to start my day so that my stressors are not compounded. So again, these are things I've had to learn through life. And again, now just mentoring your brother and your sister and yourselves as to how much to compile in one day. And then you also know, what are my goals? What's my bucket list in life? And this is what I want to do before age 60 or age 65. And these are this is where I want to go. This is what I want to experience. It's really important to make sure you do those things, because nobody can reward you for what you've done in life really the way you can. You can be intentional with your schedules, with your life, to make sure that you're hitting all of those goals. And then you're just very careful about who you let in your circle, because those will be the people that'll keep you from being able to do those things. So I think keeping your circle very small, very close, and then being intentional with your schedule.
And I think sometimes that could come off as maybe arrogant or your small circle, because like you said, there's only so much time in a day. And as an entrepreneur, and you have hundreds of people relying on you every day, you only have the capacity to make so many great decisions in one day. That's something that I've learned. I could keep making decisions, but at some point, enough's enough, and the decisions I may be making later in the day aren't the right ones.
Right. Well, how many times do you and your dad try to get me to get one more meeting in, and I'm like, I'm gone. And you're like, yeah, she's really gone.
She'll just walk out. It's impressive.
Because I know my boundaries, but it took me a long time to get there. And I think I probably messed up a few things over the time that I was trying to be superwoman to everybody. And I'm not sure that I ended up doing anything right during those times. So I want to make sure that what time I am putting into, the new set of goals or the new things I want to do in life, I want to make sure that I get there. And you're right. Time management is super important when it comes to having boundaries for your family.
Yeah, and I think another key point is that you have to trust the people that you hire to work for you to do their job. I think at some point in time, you have to not try to micromanage people. You have to let them sort of do what they do, set the actual parameters. But you really can't micromanage. I've found that. I always tell you that, we don't work with computers. They're not going to be perfect. You got to accept people where they are, and you have to, get as much out of people as you can. And I think, as you age and as you get wiser, for example, we made a commitment to try to, I don't start anything as well till, 9:30, 10 o'clock, whereas it used to be 8 o'clock, you're up and you're rolling, and you have to manage your time better, and the things that are important, that's what you try to accomplish. So prioritizing your time and empowering your people to do the right kind of jobs, I think, are extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
Getting into a little bit of the family dynamics or a relationship dynamics between a husband and a wife, or whoever may be starting this business together, what would you say has been the hardest part of building a business with family?
Can I start then?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think when we first started out, it was important that we knew we were married first. You know what I'm saying? It was just us, no kids, and we knew that we knew what we were each, sort of good at. We always had our lanes. I think we've done a good job our whole life and our whole business life to stay in our lanes. But I feel like we both have always sort of committed that we're husband and wife first. And that's number one. Business was number two. So for me, my wife and Caitlin, they do design and they have their ideas. For me, I don't really care if a wall's blue or brown or whatever. It's your call. I mean, you have to really focus on, as a husband and wife, what matters, and the things that don't matter, you don't focus on. So we do a good job of staying in our own lane. She doesn't get into a lot of the financial and the forecasting the future and the business on stuff, whereas she's in the operate. We have our lanes. We stay in our lanes. We do those well, and we respect that for each other. Like if it's something that's important to you, it's important to me. Because there's not always the right way to do it. If you make a choice, usually you have to stick the path, you have to ride it out, and you make that choice work. I think that, I really can't think of many things that we've done that they haven't worked. Maybe we could have, in hindsight, said we probably should have done it differently. It would have been easier, but we've always made things work because whatever path you take, I always say, if your goal was to get across the table, you may choose to go left, I go right, but as long as we get to where we're going, that's what matters. But I think from our perspective as a husband and wife, that's always been the overriding factor, is to make sure that you respect that, you take time for each other, and you don't let the business piece override it. So I haven't felt like that was difficult. For me personally, I felt like we've handled that well. We both sort of see, we really do a good job of not stepping on each other's toes. And, you trust me if I let you do pretty much anything you want to do, but if I'm serious feeling that that's a wrong decision, I feel like you hear me and you step up and you say, we're not going to do that because that's something that I'm taking a hard stance on. I don't do that a lot because, you're very smart, you know what you're doing, and you're intuitive. And I trust that instinct with you as a woman and as my business partner. On the vision side of stuff, there's a lot of things that we've had that's like, they're big steps. And we've always decided that as a couple, that's what we're going to do. But you were probably more the visionary, and you just have to. Even when we first started, when you took me to Spout Springs, and I saw that, little dumpy ranch house, I said, "What are we doing? Why are we giving up, real jobs?" And look where we are now. That was never a plan in what we were doing to think that we would be doing what we're doing now. I mean, we probably had 5 employees then. Look where we are now. But we take those steps of faith, and as a couple, I think the strength that you gain from a couple in our situation makes it stronger. That's going to be different for our kids. And when they get a spouse, I've actually heard you say it before, I see you guys bouncing ideas off of, and there's certain lanes that you both stay in that I think has made us successful and stronger because that works for us, but that's going to be different for you guys based on what kind of spouse you have and how they blend and how you complement each other.
Yeah, I think I really don't need to add anything to that. At the end of the day, I want to always make him look good, and he's always done a great job at making sure that I look good in decisions and whatever room we're in, giving credit to where credit is due. He really doesn't require a lot of credit. But, I always want people to understand this would be who you need to talk to about this because this is Brian's lane. And then there's times that somebody will want to talk about care and you're like, you really need to talk to Vickie about that because these are things that we do well. And why should we try to,
Yeah, we sort of know what lane to
toes.
not step into. Like, it's sort of like mom and dad with staff. Sometimes staff will try to play you and say, well, what do you think? And they know how to work. It's like your kids sometimes. But like there's often times when it comes to care questions, I really don't get in that world. That is all your world. You do it well. And I'll direct staff. I said, whatever Vickie wants, or if I sometimes give a different direction than what I back off because that's, I
think it's been really neat how, God brought two people together back in 1988 and I had no idea what he was really good at. I knew we had dated and I knew what he thought he wanted to do in life. And then I knew, really where my desires laid. But, eventually it just all blended. And he does things really well. And I don't really have to question him. So I think you just have to choose, just exactly like he said, that God comes first and then our relationship and then business. And that's kind of how we've lived our life.
Well, if we were business partners, two men and woman, it's a whole different perspective than if you're a couple. I think the fact that you're a couple and so work sort of doesn't end when you go home. We're on vacation. We're always talking about work, but we do turn it off. We do have fun. We enjoy what we do. I mean, our lives with our kids, that's something that we do live. But I think from how somebody in business who has a partner handles business with a partner than what you do if you're in business as a couple, it is totally different.
Well, and I've always loved the fact that, if I'm getting an accolade, you would rather be there on the front row
absolutely.
Than you actually getting it yourself. And then vice versa. I mean, today you had a party and I made sure that I stood in the background because it was your day. And so in business, we know what we do and we do it well. And it's just always worked and God's blessed us for it because we had our priorities, right?
Moving on, how do you handle disagreements when the line between personal and professional is paper thin? Not everybody gets along. Not everybody's going to agree with the same decision or how to get to there.
My question, no, not mine. I defer. I mean, honestly, I just do. I mean, again, it comes back to that whole thing about husband and wife. There's really, again, you pick a direction, you go left or right. I defer. If I feel that something you feel strongly about, I'm not going to argue with that. I mean, because unless there's really something that I feel like you're wrong about.
And then if there is, I know enough about you to know that if it's something you're really taking a stance on, I need to step back and fall back and listen to what you have to say because God's put that in your heart. And even though I think I'm right, if you have reservations about it, I have learned I need to listen. And most of the time you're right. You may say that again.
I was going to ask you to say it again, especially since I'm 60 today, but you
You're
could say
always
that again.
right.
Well, no, I definitely am not always right, but I do think there's a factor, again, from the perspective of a husband and wife working together. Again, if you're keeping the husband and wife first.
I think it's really important too that we say that we feel so blessed. It's been 33 years and we just feel completely blessed that God chose us to be together in life, to raise 3 brilliant children that will carry on the journey past us, way past us. And that, my mission in life really became your heartbeat as well. And isn't it cool how that happened? And it wasn't by chance. God had that ordained. And I think that, really and truly as we sit here, we have to remember that God ordained every bit of it, every bit of it.
I want to go back kind of to the early days, when you first were starting out. And when did you first notice that work and personal life were blending well?
Well, I think just the growth we experienced in the major accomplishments. He would come in really excited about something he had been working on, and I found myself rejoicing with him just as much as the fact that I had sold 25 beds on my own that day without any help. And I'm bringing it all to his desk, and he's going, "How did you do all this?" And we're rejoicing together, and there wasn't this animosity of, "I need more praise than you do. And by the way, you just worked all day, but I'm going to go cook dinner and put three kids to bed." I never felt the need to throw anything up to him. I just knew that he was celebrating me every step of the way. And then I celebrated him. And eventually it meant that we had all of our priorities. Now, never was perfect. I'm not going to sit and say that there weren't some valleys, and anytime there's a valley, then you have to, go back up to the mountaintop. We had plenty of those through life. But there was never a time that we did not feel like we should celebrate each other. There was always that celebration of, I knew what he was working on and he accomplished it. He knew what I was working on. And you have to give each other confidence. Because if one starts trying to outweigh the other, that's when you get a little, slippery. And you need to always make sure that each person is getting filled up with confidence.
I think we always explored things from the same perspective. I mean, if there was something that interested me, you never quelled that. Or you're a very creative kind of person. So for you, I say, what if we did that? I was always into that. I mean, those ideas were always fun. And we would just talk and dream about them. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes that's where things were birthed. Yeah. From the standpoint of those creative ideas. I never said, and you never said to me, "That's stupid, we're not going to do," but because we were in business together, so we understood what we were doing. We understood in our
We also
our skill
knew
sets.
at some point that if God was bringing that particular desire to us, that we needed to listen.
Well, and we also made a conscious decision that we would always walk through open doors. If we felt like there was an opportunity, I always tell you, let's explore it. Mm-hmm. If it's not supposed to be, it will close. But
anytime it became hard, then we knew that it wasn't the right thing to do. Right. Because if it's easy, then God's taking you through the steps and he's not burdening you with failure. If failure started to set in, we started back off because we knew that just wasn't the right thing to do.
And you get a gut feeling in both of you, like we would say, are you feeling this? And she'd say yes or no. And we would guide off of each other. And as you're married, you tend to think alike. You understand each other better. And it's almost like you're thinking for each other.
Well, we have had a lot of people say, "I don't see how in the world you both work as many hours as you do together." And it was like a newsflash to us. We were like, really?
Well, on that statement, that's a great segue. The saying is never mix business and family. Mm-hmm.
I don't know any other way to do it. But that's unique to us.
How do you protect your relationships when the business doesn't stop?
Mm-hmm. Again, you're asking me questions that's always just come second nature for us. We never thought about it. It was nothing that we sat and thought, oh, now if could our marriage end if something doesn't go right? It was just a commitment from the very beginning. And I think that if you're always in that plan that God has for you and you don't vary from it, and you keep the prayer chain going, like, Lord, guide my day, Lord, and that was often for us. There's never a time that we even start going on a trip that your father was not intentional. You'll know this, that we pray before we even pull out the driveway. And so bringing your faith into this is super important. And no matter how you believe, if you're Catholic, if you're Episcopalian, if you're Methodist or Lutheran, we all know that we believe that there's a God that guides our path. And so, having prayer be such an important part of our lives. I can still, to this day, before your dad starts his day, I watch him spend a great deal of time in prayer before he even walks out that door. And he's praying for every one of us and his family and whatever's going on during the day. And how many times have I said to you three, you will never make it with what we're doing without praying. So to keep those open lines of communication of God's guidance, his healing, his enduring, faithfulness to us is super important in everything that we're talking about here. But there was just never a time that we knew to do it any different. It was what we started with in 1992 with 19 residents and 9 staff. And we just kept pushing forward to where we are today. And we never looked back. Were there mistakes made, or were there areas that could have been done a little differently? Oh, absolutely. But we learned from those and then picked up and went on to the next phase. Even now, sitting here and knowing that, we're both getting ready to have birthdays. You just had one. It happened so fast. I mean, life just went by so fast. And we used to have our parents and my grandparents, your grandparents, tell you, hey, hold on to every moment because it's going to go by so fast. And we just told you that the other day. We're like, this is what my parents used to say to me. But it's so true. And I think if you're in God's will, if you're right where he planted you, you don't have to worry about, did I do it right or could I do it differently?
Well, and one piece to add to that too, I think it's easy, we're sort of portraying this, that when things are going well, and doors are opening and things are clicking along, it's easy to compliment each other. It's easy to, because you're on a roll. It's in the harder times. And I don't want to, we've had many of those kind of times. They always are opportunities for growth and to help you make changes and stuff like that. So it's great to talk about all those good times, and people maybe see all the things that have happened that are successes. But there's failures and there's things. It's a harder time when you're going through tougher times or struggles, or you have an employee issue that's really causing you a problem. So that's when you really lean on each other for that kind of guidance. But when things are good, it's just always easier. And I think as a couple, it's great to have that strength to lean back on when there's times are more difficult.
It was just never an option for it to be any other way. At the end of the day, there was a commitment made in October the 8th, 1988. And at the end of the day, no matter if there were little hiccups along the way, and there have been a few, that it was, we're going to work this out and we're going to remain faithful to our God and to each other, and what God brings to you, he will take you through. And I'm, probably a little bit idealistic there, but I also know that if I can do it, anybody can.
We talk about this on the show, but when you reference the sandwich generation, work is not easy, but when you're only worried about your kids and your business, that's one thing. But then as you get a little older and you start worrying about trying to take care of your parents, and also the business and your kids, what have you noticed throughout getting older? Have you noticed that there's any change there with the work balance and trying to juggle so many things between parents, kids, animals, all that great stuff?
Yeah, it didn't get any easier. Probably got a little worse.
Harder, right?
Yeah. No, we went through it with your parents already. And we, I have to say your daddy was super dedicated to both his mom and his dad. And when they needed us, we were there. He made sure that he set up a plan of care for them way back when I first met you. I was working in a nursing home, so I had all the answers. I thought I did. Little did I know I was just getting started. But you made sure that they were secure and that we had a life plan for them. We brought them to Lynchburg, and they were able to watch you guys continue to grow up. Chandler was 4 when they moved here, so he was the grandchild that they really got to go see all these different things he was doing. And as God took them home, I can remember during some of those weeks feeling like, whew, how are we still going to go to a ball game and still go get Nanny and then take them to the doctor and all that different stuff. And now starting into it with my parents, I've, made it very clear to everybody in our immediate family that I'll stop my travels, I'll stop my speaking or whatever it is, and make sure that I don't regret not being here for my mom and dad should they need us. And we are available now for this, part of Nana and Papa's life, that if they need us, there's been some health issues along the way over the last 5 years. And so we will take that on as we get it. But the big thing is to have a plan, and I think we have a plan. And I have to know that that's my calling. The Bible says to respect your elders and your parents to the very end. And I don't want to ever be accused of taking care of everybody else's family in town, everybody else's elder, and not being able to take care of my own. It's super important. It's at the top of my priority list every day. And you have inherited some of that as well with Nan and Papa. We share the responsibilities as a family. My sister's very involved in the everyday. If they should need us, they're still very independent, but there are times that they need us to do a few things. So I think you hit another topic that we could probably elaborate on another show, is that, as you begin to get into your late 50s and 60s, you are going to have a set of parents, or even just one, that may be hanging out around the mid 70s or 80s and even above, that you're going to have to put into your life plan.
Well, I can say that you both have done a great job taking care of your parents, and you should be very proud, because I was there every step of the way. And even today, you'll drop, drop a hat in the moment, to take off and to do whatever they may need, because you just never know. Mm-hmm. So for those that are tuning in here on Around the Table with Vickie, I'm your co-host, Chris Runk. Across the table from me, as always, is my mother, Vickie Runk, and we are joined by my father, Brian Runk, today. And we are discussing work-life balance. But Dad, you touched on it just a second ago, where everything in entrepreneurship and business and life isn't always peachy and the greatest. I always enjoy this question, and it's something to think about. What would you say is your greatest sacrifice, and what is your cost of business?
Excellent question. I think it depends on what snapshot in time that you're looking at. It's easy to look at the successes and the growth and the things that have happened that have been good things. But I think it's really when you go through more of the struggles that you grow the most. And at the time of it, you don't see that. But I think what you bring from that, it's almost like a pruning. Sometimes, you're blessed with all this great stuff, but if you never went through struggles or you never had challenges, you would never be pushed to make yourself better. So I think really it's in the times that you're struggling with stuff, or some things they're not working how they're supposed to, that you use those things to try to analyze, what am I doing differently? What can we do that would help us become stronger as a company? And again, with the work-life balance with us, it's great having a resource who's in the trenches with me. I mean, it would be hard if I had a different kind of job and I was struggling at work and coming home and didn't have someone to share that with. But I think having somebody else to talk things through is helpful.
And I think the answer, what he's trying to probably get at, is he's probably given what the cost for him has been, is that you've given up a lot of free time for himself. And that's probably going to be my answer too. I made sure that you guys always had my time. But for me to have personal time is very unusual. Mm-hmm. Very unusual. Sometimes I'll go to the top of the house and lock myself in a room. I need 10 minutes.
You don't enjoy her by saying Mom?
No.
And Vickie?
No.
Come on.
And that's probably true as a couple. We probably have given up some some time that we would have had just us. And I know those times are coming, but again, if you love what you're doing, it's not really a sacrifice. But probably our privacy is another thing that we've probably given up, because you always have to be on all the time for whoever needs you.
Yeah.
And it's not so much that we're that interesting, because that's not the case. It's just we're in a business that serves others. And you can never let your problems absorb you, because you have to be ready to fix those that depend on you. That to me is what I've given up. That's the price of, I can never just know that there's a day that somebody's not going to need me, because that's just not the case. And I don't want to fail. No, you cannot turn it off. You can never turn it off.
And I think that's what you mean by constantly being on.
Yeah.
You could have just had a major, a death in a facility, and you're dealing with all that. Next thing you know, you walk into a restaurant, you're already feeling down, and you need to be helped for a family member who may be sitting in that same restaurant that's got issues with her mom, and you need to be ready to be on to help them through that journey, or be a shining light to that next person. So that the mental capacity,
yes,
I think is for me,
that was the price.
And then just general relationships with people.
Right. I mean, there's not a lot of time in our lives. We've never really found extra time for anyone else. And so what extra time we have has been given to you and your brother and sister. And then I have to make sure I still set my parents as priority. And then I have a beautiful little great niece who is like my grandchild. I'll disclaimer. And then I have a nephew that's young. So we have littles in the family. They just don't belong to us. They're just distant. And I always want to make sure that they have good holiday time and they remember coming to our house and spending time with us. So all of that is intentional that I have to fit in. So if there's anybody else on the peripheral border that would like to share some of our life, it's really hard. That's not to say it's not necessary, because I wouldn't advise other people to do that. I would say that you do need a friend group, but is that something we've been able to fit in? No.
But we've also, I mean, your time is spent with family here in the business walls, and then you find yourself really relying on your staff members to kind of be those extra relationships and be those work relationships that I've found that I treasure.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the people that God brings our way to help us do what we do are extra special, and it doesn't matter what position it is in. I know that if there were to be a crisis in our life, there's a good portion of the company that would show up for us, and that's been us pouring into them, and we're always so overwhelmed when they, give that back. Just like your dad today. I mean, the room was full of people that truly loved him, and there was some really special words spoken over him, and those are blessings. And so, yeah, you're right. You're right on that. Right on the mark.
Before we go, I want to ask each of you one last thing. When the balance feels off, when everything's pulling at you, what grounds you? What brings you back to center?
I think for me, the fact that when you pillow your head every night, that you've made a difference, that you've, I hear a lot of your calls for families that are going through admissions and people don't plan for what they're going through. It's a struggle. And, life was good and all of a sudden mom now has a stroke. What do we do? Or, there's life issues, life or death issues, or what's our next step? They're not just like, what are we going to have for dinner? They're major issues. I think the fact that we're able to have more you than me. I mean, I'm more in the business side of stuff, but I hear your conversations in the car or at night on the phone with advising people and talking through stuff. I think what I take away is the fact that you really do make a difference for people to help them in real struggles that are, what I would call higher level life decision struggles in their life with their families and their loved ones. It's really a blessing to be able to do that because you've been blessed with these opportunities. You've seen some of these things to advise people. Now, every situation's different, but I think the thing that I take away is at the end of the day, you really feel like you're, all jobs are important and they're all sort of meaningful, but, it's like when you're a doctor and you did surgery and you cured some cancer or you fix their knee or whatever. You've done something that's life-changing. I feel like in some of our things, more you than me, that we really help families in really tough struggles that they don't always know the answer to do, and just at least having someone to bounce ideas off of. Oftentimes we think of the residents that come to us at times. It's really the families. Families struggle more with that. I think the residents oftentimes, like I say, it's like going to college. You meet new friends, you have all this new kind of exposure stuff, but it's tough for families. So I think the fact that we can make a difference in these people, you see them at church, you run into somebody at the grocery store, on the golf course that are, thank you for helping me with that. You don't really know what kind of impact. So it does sort of recharge your batteries when you feel like you've been able to do something that sort of matters to people.
Yeah, I think for me, number one, if I really need to be grounded, there's several things that I can do. Number one, I can turn up some really good CC wine and praise music, and God just brings me where I need to be in my mental capacity. And I remember that He's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and He's given us our life, and He's blessed us beyond measure. And I remember that that's why I put my clothes on every day and do what I do, because years ago I was called. But then there's times like today to where we have a independent living program that's at the bottom of the hotel that we'll feature one day. And I had a second generation 92-year-old great lady that's living with us down on that floor. And we have some really great residents down there, super independent. You can't need any care you have to be able to do for yourself. And they have the luxury life of the swimming pool and the chef cooking for them. And it's a really great little program. Right now we only have 10 beds and there's only 3 left. And she came to your birthday party because, Brian, years ago we took care of her mother at Leesville Road. And we lost her mother at 92. And here she is driving, totally independent, just dresses just as pretty as anything. And she came to your birthday party and said, I wasn't invited, but I wasn't going to miss this. And she looked at me and she said, you have not come down to see my apartment. I need you to come see my apartment. So at the end of your party, I grabbed you and I said, we have to go see her apartment. It means something to her. And we knocked on the door to where we were greeted by her dog, Tippy. And I opened that door. The last time I'd seen that room, it was empty. We were getting ready to welcome in those folks. And she looked at me and said these words, and this is what keeps me grounded. This is my home. This is my home. And she looked at me and told me how important that room, that apartment had become to her. That she was selling her home of 60-some years, just put it on the market. And she was telling me about signing the papers. And she said, how many second generations have you cared for? And I thought, goodness, we got to have her on the show, Christopher. But when I looked in her eyes, and she never let loose of my hand, and I never let loose of her, and I told her, I said, you are the queen, I'm telling you. And she told me she was going to let me wear a crown one day. And I began to realize it all matters every day. Every moment, every intentional thing that we've done in senior living, right down to now the perennial program at the hotel, to where we wanted a small little aspect of that, to where it could be a feeder program, and that's what's happening. And then we have an evangelist that's living down there that just led one of them to the Lord. And I'm looking at that small hallway that has a day room. It was something you wanted to try. And I'm thinking, wow, what has just happened here? You know, and when that's what keeps me grounded, is to go back in the environments in which we've created and spend just a little bit of time of God reminding me, this is where you started, this is where the middle is, and this is what really matters. And so for us, it's the joy of seeing everything we built over the last 33 years, number one, further the kingdom of God, because there's always an element of that. And number two, secure that anxiety within a senior in which she can say, this is my home.
I know growing up, I mean, that's kind of piggybacking off just what you just said. I mean, that's anytime we need to get our cup refilled or leveled up. I mean, that's where we tend to go, is inside the communities. And just to have personalized stories like that, you know, it kind of reminds you why you guys started this business 33 years ago.
And when you sit inside an office all day long, and, you know, because you know as well as I do, I'd rather be with them. But that's not the way God has it right now. I'm, you know, separated from the day-to-day, and you have to intentionally go there, which you were just talking about. And when you are finally like brought face to face with what you've built, with what God has helped you build, it's just a complete looking into the future and knowing. And number one, we were just talking, Brian, too, that when we get to heaven, we hope all the people that we've helped ushered in to heaven's gates, and somewhere in our homes, they've accepted Christ. And they knew where they were going. They didn't come in that way, but through Thomas Rhodes' ministry and a lot of the local churches, a lot of the pastors here in town, they found their way to God, and eventually ushered into heaven. And we think about when we get there, how many will be waiting? I mean, that is an overwhelming feeling, and it keeps you keep wanting to keep on and keep on, and then. For the second generation, well, you know, you guys will have to share that vision as well, which I know you do. But it's just fun to kind of sit and talk about these things. And every business has its moments to where they're reminded of why you did what you did. And I think that's where you get regrounded and where you go back to the rock, so to speak.
Well, I can say that I couldn't be more proud of both of you. And that's a pretty awesome thing to think about. I think I can say tens of thousands of seniors that you both have cared for over your 33 years in business. That's pretty incredible thought when you sit down and break it down like that, Mom. Well, Dad, thank you for joining us on the show today. Listeners, thanks for pulling up a chair and joining us here on Around the Table with Vickie. As always, we like to end each show with a quote. So, Mom, the floor is yours.
All right, let's go. The concept of balance in life is about achieving a harmonious state between different aspects of one existence, including work, personal life, and well-being. It's not about perfection, as we've talked about today, or having everything perfectly aligned, but rather about finding a rhythm and flow that allows for both productivity and fulfillment. Thank you so much for getting up close and personal with us over these last few episodes. Thank you for being right here around the table. And Brian, happy birthday, 60, one more time.
There you go.
Happy birthday. Y'all see him out. Send him an email.
That's right.
Let him know that, he's welcomed into the 60s Club. And until next time, I'm Vickie, and we're all right here around the table.